I don't have my camera on either, do I?
Okay, let's see. And I will start letting people in. All right, we should be good.
Thank you, Annie. And thank you, everybody who is joining us this evening on Zoom or on the live stream. Welcome to the second to last of our evening digital rendezvous sessions. Got a great panel of TU volunteer leaders lined up for you tonight. This evening's event, as well as all the sessions we've had with the digital rendezvous, have been made possible thanks to the generosity of our sponsors. I'd like to take a moment to recognize them. We appreciate the support of Alpine Bank, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, RepYourWater Engineers, and Freestone Aquatics. Their generosity for this digital rendezvous has helped us provide this opportunity for you to engage with folks like our speakers tonight. That website there, coloradotu.org/rendezvous, you can check that out for links, including to being able to see some of the recorded sessions if you've missed any of the ones so far. Our featured sponsor tonight is Alpine Bank, and we'd like to take a moment to share a quick video message from them. Thank you, Annie, and thank you, Alpine Bank, for your generous sponsorship of the Digital Rendezvous. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our program tonight, focused on advocacy and then making our grassroots advocacy more effective. Leading the session tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of our Bull Moose Advocacy Committee, Barb Sheedlo. I had the privilege of seeing her in action as an advocate in Washington, D.C., as well as in action as a volunteer leader with the Bull Moose Committee, and I can tell you that our grassroots leadership is in very capable hands. Barb, take it away.
Thanks, David. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And get it in slideshow. There we go. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep, it's up.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As David said, we've got a great panel here to talk about successful grassroots advocacy in CTU and some lessons that we've learned from it. And I don't know if Scott Willoughby's on the phone, but this is his beautiful picture of the South Platte in South Park, and an area where it's very important to protect, and currently working on plans with the BLM for resource protection there, but it's a good one to keep in mind as we move forward. So each of us are going to introduce ourselves here for just a second. So as David said, I'm Barb Sheedlo. I'm the chair of the Bull Moose Committee. I'm also the vice president for St. Vrain Anglers here on the Front Range in Longmont. I am a fairly recent retiree. I moved here to Colorado about 4 years ago, and that's when I got involved with Trout Unlimited. So I'm really new, and many of you know much more about the history than I do, but I've been having fun learning a lot in this role. Ross, you unmute yourself and talk a little bit about what you're going to say tonight?
Certainly can. I am Ross Bruno. I am a board member with the Evergreen Chapter, and I will be going through just a brief case study on one particular item where the chapter as well as CTU partnered, not only between ourselves, but with outside conservation organizations to protect some waters. So just a brief study.
Great, thank you. And then Corinne is next.
I'm Corinne Doctor, and I am the co-owner with my husband of RepYourWater. We're an apparel company and a business partner of Colorado Trout Unlimited. I'm also director at large for the Colorado Trout Unlimited board. My local chapter is the Boulder Flycasters, where I also serve on the board. And I'll be speaking more from a business perspective of how we have used our platform for advocacy, both financially and through our various channels of communication.
Great, thanks. And Matt.
I can't unmute myself.
We can hear you.
Okay, I've done it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Cheroutes. I am an old Denver kid, born and raised, and started fly fishing after I pretty much quit skiing because of traffic on I-70, right? So I have my experience, spent years working for Senator Ken Salazar here in Colorado, then jumped over into Governor Bill Ritter's office where I spent his term, and I hung around in John Hickenlooper's administration for a while. I'm a consultant strategic communications and public affairs. I've been fortunate to be able to do some work with the Bull Moose Committee of Colorado Trout Unlimited, and I'm going to be talking to you guys tonight about how to build relationships with policymakers and lessons learned from hanging out with policymakers for the last 20 years, and how we can engage them and drive our agenda. So thanks for having us tonight. Look forward to talking.
Great, thank you. We do, if you guys have questions, if you want to type it in the chat box, I know that I think Annie or David is going to be looking at that for us and letting us know if we have questions, or we'll have more discussion at the end. I did neglect to say that I'm actually going to talk and just give a little bit of background on advocacy. I know folks have all different levels of experience with it, so just a little bit of introductory slides on that, and then speak a little bit about Bull Moose Committee in a few minutes. But all of the members speaking tonight are Bull Moose Committee members, so we appreciate that. So the first thing I just wanted to stop and pause on is that advocacy is core to TU and CTU's mission. And when you look at our mission to conserve and protect and restore our cold water fisheries, and you go and you read our mission, advocacy is right there. And that's how we get there, up to promote conservation. So it's very critical, and we've been doing successful advocacy for a long time. But for me, coming in here new, and I am a scientist, I'm a 30-year geology, or 30-year career as an earth scientist. I really didn't have exposure to public policy or to advocacy, and I would hear the term and see it in missions, and I really wasn't quite sure what did it mean and what did it look like. And so I had a little fun. In Latin, the word comes from advocare, which means to call out for support. And a lot of people think about advocacy, they think about the paid lobbyists that are always chasing down a legislator, trying to get him or her to vote in a certain way. But, there's so much more to advocacy, and it's such a critical link for a nonprofit and organization like ours. And so I liked this definition about it's a tool. Advocacy is a tool to put a problem on the agenda and then to find a solution or a proposed solution to that problem, and then finding support so that we can actually move forward with that solution. It's about influencing public policy, which for some of that leads then on to legislation. But these days, with our focus on our ability to reach out to so much of the public with social media and other ways, it's really about influencing public opinion, which then can help us be successful in these other areas. And when we talk about grassroots advocacy, in this discussion, we're talking about citizen-based, volunteer-based activism. and is about expanding even beyond our membership and our volunteers to the folks around us in our community that can help us with that call out for support. You know, as I started working in this area, and I understood that Trout Unlimited and CTU has a very strong reputation for the work that we do in advocacy, and we really are respected out there. And you will hear that it's our core values that underlie us that drive these strengths. I think Matt Moskal in his talk on the first night really talked about some of these core values that we have, but they help us to be successful in advocacy. The fact that we're grounded in science, that it's fact-based, it's tangible, that we build partnerships. We build partnerships with all kinds of organizations, with obviously the wildlife agencies, with municipal organizations, with other conservation organizations that really help us to leverage our support and broaden our voice out there. We are pragmatic, we're realistic. We're known for not really being on the edge of things, but we know that we have to be pragmatic, because to get to these solutions, they have to work for many and be something that we can align around with our partners. We are nonpartisan, and of course, that's part of us being a 501c3 organization. But I think it's really more than that, and that the being nonpartisan is what helps us be able to solve the problems over the long term. Because legislators may come and go, but the problem is still there, and so we have to build relationships on both sides of the aisle. We are in it for the long haul. These are complex problems that we're trying to solve. And so we can't take kind of short-term wins and sacrifice the long-term benefit. But overall, I think the main thing that makes TU stand out, maybe among other organizations that are also advocating, is the uniqueness of our organization is that we're so volunteer strong and volunteer driven. And that we are focused on place-based type campaigns. So you really are able to kind of grab our volunteers' interest, because you're talking about advocating for things that are right there at home that are important to them. So I'm really proud to be part of this organization when you talk about the kind of core strengths we have and how that helps us. So I know we have a variety of people on the phone. I did want to do a quick Zoom poll just to see. I think David's going to share this. It is multiple choice. It's really trying to figure out or trying to understand what level and where people have been involved in advocacy. So you should be able to click on multiple ones if you wouldn't mind doing that for me for a minute. And I'm going to do it too. Maybe I don't get to do it. I just get to read it. Okay. Great. Well, I've got 0% of you guys have not participated in anything. So everyone has been in the practice of advocacy, and it seems to be pretty much across the board for local and state and national level of TU, but also for other nonprofits and in your own community and your neighborhoods and schools. So, thank you so much for that. And that's really helpful to kind of understand where everyone's coming from. We will keep going. Oh, share results. Yeah, I guess you guys saw that, hopefully. Can we make this, how do I make this poll go away? There we go. Thank you. Okay, talking a little bit about what does advocacy look like in practice. And these aren't really necessarily linear, but I think they're all important elements of advocacy. Particularly being as a chapter or a council, really being able to identify what are the priorities that you're going to work on this year or for the next 3 years. This is part of something we're trying to put in place with the state council with Bull Moose to really align around those goals and priorities each year. As you identify your priorities, what relationships do you need to build to be successful at that? And Matt's going to talk more about this later on, but relationships from lawmakers to agency partners to other conservation organizations. Being able to inform and educate stakeholders about the issues. One thing that I enjoyed, Corinne and I actually went to DC together last November and had the opportunity to meet with all of our congressmen, senators, and representatives from Colorado and their staff. And one thing we were talking about was Land and Water Conservation Fund, and we were able to take in materials that some folks, staff at CTU had produced, which were just beautiful pictures and information on what the Land and Water Conservation Fund had done in their district. And while they had heard a lot about the fund from many, being able to kind of see it right there and hear the impact, and also hear from Corinne and I how it impacted our particular area, I think was very helpful for us when we were talking about that with our message. Other pieces including collaboration with allies, so like-minded conservation groups or city groups that are maybe trying to do the same thing that we are. It helps to build that partnership there. And when you get down to the grassroots level, it's successful if you can get the policymakers or the legislators really out to see what you're talking about in person. You can showcase your watershed and talk about your issues. You can hold events, which really take people on the ground in the field for that. And finally, being able to ask for their support. And I'm not necessarily talking about the end where you're particularly asking someone to vote a certain way, but really asking for support and finding out how they can help maybe connect you to others that are looking at the same cause, and things like that are really important. I think when you hear from our speakers later, they will be talking about their successes around some of these particular elements. I also didn't know when I came in here a couple of years ago of, well, how do folks really do that? I mean, it's great to say advocate, but what are the ways that you do it? What are the methods? And there's a whole range of things that are the way that you communicate in order to gather that support. At St. Verlaine, for a chapter, one thing we've found really helpful is our chapter newsletters. We're a small chapter, well, not a huge chapter. We have about 400 members. But not all of them come to meetings. And so we do try to include something about advocacy every month in the chapter newsletter. And we find that we do hear back from our members, even the ones that haven't come to the meeting, asking about that or thanking us for providing updates on advocacy. And it doesn't necessarily just come from Bull Moose. I mean, we'll go out and access what's online for CTU or National TU and talk about everything from Pebble Mine to in-stream flows and the chapters like it. I'm not going to go through all of this, but another thing, though, I would say that CTU really stands out on is around our action alerts. We've got a great system, and hopefully you guys have responded to a number of those, which can send emails directly to your legislators. And we've had some really good results with that in our latest Oil and Gas Commission rulemaking. And a way that people may not think so much about doing advocacy, but it's been successful for CTU, is participating in agency work groups. So for example, right now, CPW is looking at some of the impact of overuse from COVID. And so we're talking about, is there a work group with that agency that we can get involved in, or a chapter could get involved in to help kind of solve that particular problem. So just a couple of words on CTU Bull Moose. Our committee, the advocacy committee, is just 1.5 years old. It was founded by Matt Moskal. Thank you, Matt. I think he's on the phone. It's amazing that he was able to kind of pull this together and get us going 1.5 years ago. He handed off to me a couple of months ago when he took on the president role. So I'm trying to live up to what he started. Our mission is promoting public advocacy at all levels for productive conservation policy and legislation. And we are working, our 4 focus areas are close to, align with our mission, working on strengthening water quality, enhancing mining and extraction regulations, improving access to public land and fishing opportunities, and of course, supporting wild and native trout. We consist of members from 12 chapters, so we have 50% of the chapters represented. We would love to have all of the chapters represented. So if you are not a member but you're interested, please give me a call or an email later. I'd love to hear from you on that. We also have staff from National and CTU that are involved in policy that help us with that. And we have Jen Bolton, who is our legislative affairs director, and is is fabulous at keeping us up to speed with what is going on with the legislature, especially when it's in session. So thanks to everybody for that. We've had a number of things on our plate in 2020. I loved seeing and hearing Matt's talk about the annual report. Some of these things are highlighted there. You know, one thing I'm really happy about was the passage in August of the Great American Outdoors Act, and including permanent funding for Land and Water Conservation Fund, as well as a lot of money to I don't have I'm not looking at the top number, but to fund maintenance in our public parks and national forests. And it's funny, I guess I was making a point when I was talking about us being nonpartisan. I mean, this just shows why you need to continue to work this in all environments. If you had told me in January that we would have, or that this bill would have been passed as a bipartisan effort in the middle of this hectic, I guess, election year, and with this administration, which has not had that many environmental successes, I don't think I would have believed it, but it came through. And Corey Gardner and Michael Bennett were just both huge advocates for this bill, and we are appreciative of that. So that was a success for us. In-stream flow bills in the Colorado legislature managed to get passed before, I'm letting people in, before the session had to, pretty much pull back to deal just with COVID issues. And so that is a big win for us. And you can read about that in the annual report. And a number of these things are still ongoing. We made good progress on the CORE Act at the national level as passing the House, but it hopefully after we get through election season, it will come back and be brought up again in 2021. And we're working on local issues supporting water district funding. The 7A are on the ballot, both on the east, both over here on the Front Range and the Western Slope for different water districts. So a lot of things going on for Bull Moose, and we really appreciate our committee members, our chapter leadership, and the folks at CTU and National TU that help us. So for my success story, before I turn it over to my other presenters, or maybe I would say lessons learned, I did want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the state advocacy we're doing with the Colorado oil and gas rulemaking. And again, I mentioned I was a geologist. I spent 30 years working for oil and gas in extraction, and but I was always a conservationist at heart. And I looked forward to, I keep getting a lot of buzzes, so I just want to make sure I'm not having an emergency from someone wanting to get in. Just excuse me, just one second. Okay, that's good. Sorry. Anyway, I'm a geologist and I spent my career in extraction. So I was happy to come back here and be able to take a role in conservation and get to weigh in on the rulemaking that's going on. And so the committee's been active in this. Just as a reminder, this is tied to Senate Bill 191 that was passed in the legislature last year in Colorado, which kind of reset the mission for the Oil and Gas Commission here and instructed the commission to move beyond fostering oil and gas development to making sure that they are protecting wildlife and public health at the same level that we are promoting oil and gas. And so we've seen this, the rules really hadn't been looked at since 2008, I believe. And so we really see this, and wildlife groups saw this as a huge opportunity to make a difference and to put in further protections for our cold water fisheries and our riparian zones. So when we're talking back about some of those things that help to make you successful, we did form a coalition with like-minded sportsman group. We're called as a group with the commission, the Wildlife Hunters and Anglers Group. So we partnered up with BHA and Colorado Wildlife Federation, National Wildlife Federation. And then we've been working closely with CPW. The agency is a big part of the rulemaking. They're really the science resource for the commission and kind of what do good protections look like. And we've been to a number of hearings with CPW and talked about our advocacy for what we're pushing for, which are broader riparian zones where you can drill. Right now you can drill within 300 feet of a river or stream. And we're looking to put in place equipment that would be prepared to respond to spills and other damage if there was an incident for anything drilled within 1,500 feet. So we're looking to expand riparian zones in our highest value fisheries as up to as much as a 1/4 mile for native trout and gold medal. But we've gone out to membership in the state and we had a huge response from our action alert. We received over 500 comments, which Annie told me is really good. So, and essentially those comments became emails that went directly to the commissioners. And so they can read that. We've done letters to the editor. We've got social media folks, a number of folks, Greg Hardy, I think is on the phone, have given oral testimony. And we're able to use our members to also give expert witness testimony. I don't know if Dennis Beekler is on the phone on the call tonight. He is a member of Bull Moose from Headwaters chapter, and he is a former Division of Wildlife commissioner or manager. Sorry, he's got the background in protection of waters and riparian zones. So he's one of our expert witnesses, along with Ashley Rust, who's our board of director and is speaking about water quality and how to maintain that. And Corey Fisher, who is our public policy lead up in Montana for National TU. So we're really able to bring some key folks to the table. This is not over. The final hearing and testimony happens in a couple of weeks, but we've already seen movement from the commission from the original 300-foot buffer to 500 feet, which we're really happy about, and just kind of shows the focus that's been on the commission and on this from many groups. So excited about that. Okay, I'm going to mute my microphone and turn it over to Ross. And Ross is, it's on my projector. Can you see everything okay that you need to see?
Yep.
Great. Well, he's going to talk about chapter successes and lessons learned. Thank you.
Not a problem. So thank you much. So I guess had a unique opportunity with one of the projects, and many of you probably did not even hear about this project because CTU was able to catch it before the pot boiled over. So let me give you a little bit of an overview. There is a property along 285 that is or has been used as a pack string property, which are mules that were used by the Forest Service to get gear and equipment in throughout the country. It was housed here, and it's considered an administrative property, but it also provided access to anglers to the North Platte, or the North Fork of the South Platte. The challenge with that is, by law, administrative properties can be sold, whereas the recreation properties are not quite as easy. So when they decided to shut down the pack string, they decided they'd sell the front side of the property, and fishermen and anglers would lose all of that access. So we were able to catch it early, and with a joint letter, not only with CTU and the chapter, but also BHA and several other conservation organizations, we were able to begin a grassroots campaign. Well, I guess combination grassroots and media relations campaign, and get it stopped. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview, but this is the reason I was asked to present this, is it is key to understanding what role the chapters play in this, because it's always easy to say if it's important, CTU is on it. Not always the best approach. The truth is CTU is on a lot of things, but it's the boots on the ground that often hear about things earliest. So with this particular one, once we heard about it, there was some word of mouth. There were neighborhood websites. Obviously, you know, if you're in the metro area, you're used to Nextdoor. If you're in the mountain communities, there's other websites that do that. We also did some media relations. You can see the press release on the right. It's in real small print, but you know, it gives you an idea of scope. And in the end, you know, within a number of weeks, the Forest Service regional offices were flooded with calls, letters. The property was removed from the potential sale list, and actually it actually not only stopped it, but actually gave it a very positive spin in that the property was then planned for bigger and better things. So they started looking at what is a better use of the property. The pack string is shutting down, and at this portion, or at this time, they are planning ADA accessibility things. They are planning channel reestablishment, habitat projects, and in all the property will be, fingers crossed, greater than it ever has been. So, and to the exact point of, you know, what it means to build those relationships, CTU has now been asked to consult on the redevelopment, not only from the habitat, but usage, access, all of those things. I know David and CTU team, as well as us from the Evergreen chapter, have been on site and working with Forest Service and School of Mines students on what that planning will look like and what the engineering will look like. So, Barb, if you don't mind hitting the next slide, I'll get into a little bit more here. So there's some important things to remember, and it's not so much about this particular project, but just in general as advocates and chapter members, just even general members. You are connected to these projects and these concerns more so than anybody else. Okay, again, nobody knows the flow better than the people that fish the river. So be there, be vocal, you know, talk about it. If you see a concern, if you hear rumors of a concern, you know, reach out to your chapter leadership, reach out to CTU and share that with us. Sometimes we've heard about that ahead of time, sometimes we have not. The reason it becomes most important is you catch it early. And by doing so, we can come up with a grassroots effort, which you can see I've got it in kind of quotations there, because grassroots often has the connotation of being a by the shoestring, off the cuff type activity. And in reality, it's not. It needs to be strategic. You're not trying to create a flood. You are approaching it in a thoughtful and strategic way. You know, and the reason I say that is because grassroots isn't about overwhelming the system or overwhelming the people involved. It is about fostering communication. That's it. Grassroots fosters communication. And whenever possible, you also have to look at how you're fostering that communication, because there are going to be projects or concerns where the bigger the circle of communication doesn't necessarily mean the better. You know, to give you an example, well, you know, it didn't actually happen with the pack string, but I'll use that as an example. Say, for instance, there was a appeal for that property to be sold and water systems and so forth to be redirected entirely for drinking water in the metro area. Again, not specific to this project, it's all hypothetical. But if your circle of influence and your grassroots communications reach the Denver area, you're going to get a whole lot of people that are advocates of that becoming drinking water, not fishing. So you do have to use your strategic approach to grassroots to reach the right audience, to foster the messages we want without getting allies towards the towards the issue that we're opposing. I know Barb touched a little bit on letters to the editor and some of the other things that have been really important with some of the chapter issues. And for that reason, we do the writer's tips. It's not just from the grassroots efforts, but as you're reaching out to your local publications and so forth. And one thing we found is really take your time with those articles or take those time with the letters. Be passionate, but not emotional. You know, think about that statement for a minute and make sure you understand what it means. You don't want to scream from the rooftops, but you do want to get your message across in a non-white paper way. And base your arguments in fact, not in rumor. One of the benefits of being local in the community as chapter leaders is that you hear about stuff and your members will see you as approachable. They'll come to you with concerns. But you still have to fact check it, because there are always rumors, there are always emotional people out there that they heard something that came from somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. And CTU has been successful nationwide being fact-based because we verify facts, we don't speak to rumors, and we can make those passionate appeals once we have all of the information. Grassroots isn't an immediate thing, it's not an urgent thing. It's a strategic thing. And, approach your individual writing the same way if you're going to be doing letters to the editor and so forth. If there are questions, we've got options at the end for that. But it's just my role is to give you kind of an overview and turn it over to the others who have a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Sorry. Thanks, Ross. I appreciate your insight, particularly around the concept of the strategic grassroots, because to really think about who your audience is that you're reaching out to is really I haven't thought about it that way as much as I should, I think. So I appreciate that. I think we're going to go to Corrine next to talk about it from a business perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. So I wanted to just kind of give a brief background on RepYourWater for anyone who doesn't know. I think I recognize a lot of the names that are on this direct call, but I know that this will be streaming later, or streaming now and then watched later. So RepYourWater, we're an apparel company, primarily in the fly fishing space, but not specific to fly fishing. We also appeal to a lot of outdoors people and also the hunting community. So we have a pretty broad reach, I would say. And all of those activities have one thing in common, which is that it is reliant on clean water for fishing, public lands for those of us who do not have amazing access to a lot of private land or private water, and a clean environment. So we, as a business, have to have all of those things in order to survive. And we recognize that, and we've never been shy about saying that. From the beginning, RepYourWater, we decided that even the name RepYourWater, while it came originally from our designs being based mostly on a location, so Colorado being a big one, we wanted it to stand for more than just a visual representation of your water or your place that you love to fish, but to financially stand for that. And I'll be giving some more examples of that on the next segment, but we wanted to use our platform for good, for lack of a better term. We wanted to have a business that is our job. It's our only job now, luckily. That wasn't always the case. Both my husband and I, we are the co-founders, and we both had full-time jobs for 3 years. And then I had a full-time job for 6 years. My husband got to go full-time first. And then another piece that kind of ties those together. We have a business that relies on certain aspects and certain policies, but so does the rest of our industry. And so being able to unite, while yes, we're in competition, quote unquote, for our consumers' dollars, we're not in competition for policies that maintain clean water, clean air, fighting against climate change, things like that. So as an industry, we are able to unite around those pieces. And then as a business, we have been around now for almost 10 years. So we were very young, still young, but we were very young when RepYourWater started. And we really appealed to a much younger demographic than the stereotypical Trout Unlimited member, but even all conservation, as we know, it's typically white, it's typically old, and it's typically male. And while we definitely veer very white and very male, we do have, our main demographic is much younger. It's about age 18 to 40 is our biggest section of our demographic. We also run between 15 and 20% female, which aligns with the fly fishing industry. And unfortunately, I don't have demographics on race or anything like that because I don't have access to that. So, but I do know that because we are very active on social media, Instagram primarily, we do end up having a much younger audience. And so we have made it kind of part of our mission to use our word through our networks to kind of put conservation in the forefront of a younger demographic's mind that doesn't typically have that in the forefront, like older generations who've been around. They've kind of seen things, you know. We want our generation and younger to be thinking now, which we're seeing, I would say, all around the world now. So I do have some examples of these things on the next page. So I mentioned that we wanted to stand for more than just a business. So we started off with what we called our 1% for conservation. Our very first conservation partner was Colorado Trout Unlimited. So for every single hat or shirt, that's what we started with, that was purchased that had like a Colorado inspired graphic, 1% of the purchase price, whether it was bought from us or a retailer, went back to Colorado TU. And we've grown that model. So as we added more states and regions to our collection, which now we have all 50 states, we added regional conservation partners, and there are 17 of those now. RepYourWater.com/conservation. You can read more about those. But it was about 2 years ago that we were looking at I was looking at my time that I was spending on running these reports, and I was doing some really weird, like if it was wholesale, I had to run this number. If it was direct, I had to run another number. So to make it cleaner and to add more money, we increased it to 3%. And that was sort of based on, 1% for the planet is cool. I love it. 2% for conservation, where 1% of your money and 1% of your time goes to conservation. We were like, okay, well, what can we do that's unique to us, that fits with our model, because it is a little bit different with all of the regional pieces. So we have our 3% for conservation now, and I run the reports every quarter. I haven't run Q3 for 2020 yet, but as of halfway through 2020, we were at $254,000 since the inception of Rep Your Water that went to our conservation partners. And a huge amount of that went to Colorado Trout Unlimited because they were our very first, and Colorado is a huge piece of our market. I did include the example of the COGCC wildlife ruling because that's the most recent, and obviously Barb spoke to more details about that recently, but we got onto the sign-on letter as a business. And then as individual business owners, we submitted comments as well. And that just ties in with that piece of we are business owners. We have a bigger stake in this than just me as an angler. As a business, for the economy, for our own employment, we have a little bit of a bigger stake in this. And so we have signed on to many letters like this. We've signed on to with other conservation partners, but this is the most recent one with Colorado TU. And then I was thinking about the other pieces of, the unity in the industry and things like that. So AFTA is the American Fly Fishing Trade Association. It's the sole trade association for the fly fishing industry. I'm also a member on that board of directors. But it was back in August 2019, I believe. All of the members who are retailers, manufacturers, guides, and media were asked to participate in a day for Bristol Bay. And what that meant was each member got to choose how much money or how much percentage of their sales they were going to donate to the Save Bristol Bay Partners. Trout Unlimited is very heavily involved in that. And I believe it netted over $100,000 in one day. We participated in that, where we sent 10% of all of our sales from that day to the cause. And we were just a drop in that bucket. All of the members of AFTA participated, and it was a huge unification for the industry. I don't live in Alaska, but I know how much that affects my industry and the economy of Alaska and the people in Alaska. And so it's that piece. And then also recently, we partnered with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, who is another one of our conservation partners, with their Vote Public Lands and Waters campaign. So just like Colorado TU, BHA cannot endorse any candidates, but what they can do is send out a questionnaire to their candidates and also ask their members to really think about a cause when you are asking someone to fill out a ballot. So think about the people that you are electing or trying to elect, people that you're voting for, and the policies that you're using your voice for. So in any of those different amendments and whatnot that we get to vote on as the Colorado people and American people, to have public lands and waters in your mind. Obviously, we all have many other pieces that we're thinking about on a daily basis, but being able to focus around something that's so close to our recreation and our business and our conservation partners is a huge piece. So just like Ross, I can answer questions later. I think there's time, but that's a wrap.
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you for what RepYourWater does for that 3%. It's so important, and for your partnership with CTU and your voice. And I think I really enjoyed spending time with Corinne and both of us in DC advocating for the first time, and being able to hear her speak to our congressman with that business and that conservation hat on. It was really fascinating. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a fun trip.
Yeah.
You think people don't think that type of thing is fun, sitting down, it seems like work, but it really is an amazing experience for when it's able to be done again. I would absolutely recommend that people make time to go sit down with their representatives, which I imagine Matt will speak more about.
Yes.
Maybe.
Okay, thank you. We are moving on to Matt. So take it away on relationships.
Sure. So we have a small crowd tonight, and I think what I'm learning, a very sophisticated crowd tonight. So I will sort of drop some of the formalities, and I will maybe go a little more in depth than kind of the 101 that we see on the slide here, because what I fear as I sit here listening to my fellow panel members is that, I worry that I don't have a ton to add. This is, like I said, a pretty savvy bunch, and you all know what you're doing very well. So let me kind of cut to the chase a little bit. And look, a couple of the things that I thought of just listening to you were Corinne, you're right. This DC trip that you guys were on, sometimes citizen advocates or citizen lobbyists wandering the halls of DC are more effective than the professionals. The paid guys, and I'm one of them, so I have to keep my mouth, shut a little bit, but we're shills, we're hired guns. And at some point we can help get you in the meetings and get you in and give you the access, but they don't want to listen to us because we're not exactly the objective sort of information. And you guys are. And, I'm listening to Ross, who said it exactly right. Stay in front of these issues, stay proactive. You are the ones, you are the advocates, you are the boots on the ground. And, Ross, I was thinking back to your example, and, I've spent plenty of days fishing up there at Shawnee, and I was with a good friend when he caught his first 20-inch trout there. So, advocating for the protection of that area and getting it and staying in front is exactly the role here. Thinking about RepYourWater and what you do, Corrine. Just the name of your business is representative of local advocacy. I remember when you guys first came out, and I remember seeing some of your branding around and thinking to myself, is this a business or is this a new advocacy org? And how cool 10 years later that you're both. And, you really show a model of what can be done out there. And that testimonial from a business perspective is powerful. So I'm just bolstering you guys because I don't have a lot to say myself, but let me just jump in and talk about how you can build relationships with your policymakers. First, all politics are local, right? So it's about who's in your community, who's going to the meetings you're going to, who are the policymakers. Often they are elected officials. They're your local city council members, your local county commissioners, your state representatives, your state senators. You may have your members of Congress, our federal senators, or U.S. senators, executive branch agencies as well. But it's not just sort of the locals or the politicos. Barb talked about this as well and really said it nicely. Agency work groups. So, they're trying to also be boots on the ground or have people in the field. And they often put together these kind of working groups, task force, blue ribbon commissions, what have you. That's, a very powerful way to engage at the local level, because what comes out of those often is what they listen to. So your voice in those instances is some of the best, kind of most pure way to craft that policy and get at those policy makers. So, how do you find those local venues? Where are they and what are they? And there's a bit of a trick to that, but I suspect you guys have spent careers now doing that, and you probably know better than anybody where to interact with these local policymakers. Something Ross said that I think it's important to point out as well is it's not just one-offs. It's not just, hey, I think I know that guy, he sits on this commission and I saw him at the grocery store, and next time I see him at the grocery store, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind, right? It's not that. It's about introducing yourself when you first see him, and every other time you see him, going up and saying hi. It's about building a lasting relationship. It's about taking that lasting relationship and turning it into sort of a trusted advisor. You want to be seen somebody who's not overreactionary, who is a valued member of the community, who's a respected, trusted, credible source on these issues, because that's who they're looking for. They're not looking for the lobbyists hanging on the rail at the Capitol in their perspective. They're not looking for paid advocacy efforts that often come across that way. They're looking for exactly who we are and who you are, is citizen advocates and volunteer support. So next bullet, no magic wand or previous slide. I have a couple more. I'm bouncing around, but there's no magic wand or no secret tricks. It's about rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. And the the stuff we see in movies and the stuff we read about in the newspapers and the bribery and the blackmail and the extortion is nothing that we should ever be getting involved in. Leave that to the pros, because frankly, it's too tricky for the pros to even deal with. And you don't need to be a professional lobbyist. You don't need to be hanging on the rail at the Capitol. You don't need to be darkening the doors of your local city council meetings every other week like I do. But you need to be accessible, and you need to be sort of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening. So roll up your sleeves, find out who is who and what they're doing. Often our agenda may not be the first priority they came into office with. So developing that relationship so you can start to work in this agenda is an important part. Means seeking them out and asking them those tough questions. And I think what you'll find is when you do it, they respect you for it. They respect you for a principled approach to advocacy. And what I find is they will often then seek you out, and they will say, hey, you were the guy who spoke up during that meeting and talked about this. Do you have more thoughts? Can you come meet with me and my staff to tell us, who we ought to be talking to about this? Next slide, please, Barb. Thank you. So, I talked about where you find these folks and who they are. Cultivating those relationships. It's not just the electeds, it's the agency leaders, the nonprofit and other community leaders. So you probably know other community leaders, key stakeholders in your local areas. These are also the policymakers. They may not be involved in issues surrounding water policy or environmental protection or trout, but they may be involved in other issues that are, closely related. So cultivating those relationships and seeing if they can expand their horizon is an important part there. Finding out their agenda, finding out what they're up to, seeing if you in your role can help them on their agenda. That really helps when you come around asking for help on your agenda. So meet and greets, Colorado Trout Unlimited will continue to post you with all of the information needed to get involved, including where you can get involved. It's been a little strange under COVID with the lack of face-to-face, but what it's meant is take the COGCC hearings. We've had great ability to get electronic communications in, and I think they may have been more valued than ever before. So that's an important piece to understand. Piggybacking on Capitol Days. Being around the Capitol is an important part. Being involved in similar efforts. So finding, those water conservation efforts, those wildlife conservation efforts. They may not necessarily be around trout, but let's find our partners and find out what they're up to and engage them in that. I love this last bullet, and I'm not sure I put it in there, but it's the best one yet. Take them fishing. So get them out. Show them your local water. Show them what the trout habitat means and why we need to protect it. It's important. It's a good offer. It tells them what we're about. I think, Barb, that may have been my last slide.
Yep, that was. Thank you. And I did put that bullet about
one more point. So
okay.
As a nonprofit, we have to be really respectful of that status in some of our advocacy and lobbying work. So what that means is we can't, as members of this group or this organization, engage in sort of paid advocacy efforts. But, I want to be real clear about that point. And I think, Barb will mention that again. But the flip side of that coin, and I want to be real clear about that too, is you can do these efforts on your own. You can donate to candidates as your own personal Joe Q citizen. And that's important to help give you the access that you need. You don't have to do that to get the access, but it sure helps. And so don't be afraid. We want to be real clear in pointing this out to you, what you can do, but also, or what you can't do, but also what you can. And so, you're not expected to roam the halls of the Capitol. You're not expected to cut checks. But if you do those things in a different personal or professional capacity, that can only be helpful to your efforts. A quick example. So I do some of this work. I recently co-hosted a fundraiser for incoming Speaker of the House, Alec Garnett. And this is someone I've known for a long time. He's a big fly fisherman. I have talked fishing with him till we're blue in the face. And he's somebody that I want to cultivate as a supporter. And so, I co-hosted this fundraiser. I did that as Matt Cheroutes in my professional capacity, not related to Trout Unlimited. Now down the road, if we go to see him on Trout Unlimited issues, I think probably I'll get some good access because of some of my other support. But I don't want to harp on this too much. I want to be real clear that as a 501c3, we have to respect that line. And so, do your citizen advocacy and do your sophisticated work that you're savvy at and you know how to do, and leave the rest to those paid shills. And well, that's a clear line. So thanks very much for your time tonight, and happy to talk more and stick around, take questions, and get a good dialogue going. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate your insight, and particularly from all the experience you've got on the ground. That's really helpful. We lots to learn there. I am going to close with kind of a little bit about what Matt was talking about, but just some considerations as we move forward, particularly on for those of you out there in the chapters, some of the considerations, as Matt was saying, that our requirement of a 501c3 is that we cannot endorse any candidates or oppose any candidates for public office, which includes, we cannot do that as we're representing Trout Unlimited or CTU, and certainly the CTU cannot, give financial sponsorship as well. But we can do things where you treat each candidate fairly or equally. Chapters have been known to host, chapter events where they will have all of the candidates in to speak about their positions on the issues, and that's a fruitful way to go around to go about learning more what they stand for and talking to them about what's important to your chapter. I think we recently did something at the state level with the Senate candidates with Hickenlooper and Gardner, asking them, both of them, the same questions and giving them the same chance to respond, and then publishing that so that it's information for our members. So just remember that piece. A second piece, which is around the 1TU message, that we want to coordinate chapter, state, and national level and make sure that we have consistent messaging. And we can really help you with that at the Bull Moose Committee. If there's something that you're thinking about, you have an issue in your chapter, something that you want to maybe have an advocacy campaign about, it would be really helpful if you could bring that to the committee, and that we can consider it from a state or a national position and make sure that it's aligned with where the 1TU is going. I think it's really important to have consistent messaging. And then finally, just making sure that we when we do communicate in letters and tweets and answering tweets on CTU or whatever, that we do maintain respectful communications. Communications are so much more casual and quick these days, between Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, that it really does help to slow down and make sure and consider what tone you might be conveying, and make sure that it's respectful, even if you disagree with somebody's position. So thanks for listening on that. There are additional resources about advocacy on the CTU and the National TU site. The first link, which I think while we're taking questions, I will copy, or maybe Annie can get into the chat box so that you guys can access it. Is a link to, I guess it's in the toolkit or the leaders toolbox, and it's got information for roles and responsibilities for chapters and chapter chairs on advocacy. And then the second link is a link to our Action Center, just again to remind you about how the Action Alert works and where a lot of information is on issues pertinent to CTU and National TU. So I think that is our last slide, and I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all now, the presenters can have a view of the chat box and questions and things like that.
Hey, Barb, if you don't mind, I'll jump in here because Matt said something that spurred a thought that I had missed when I was talking.
Okay, please.
And, everybody absolutely throw your questions in. I'm just kind of stalling while we do this.
Okay,
but, it is important to have those relationships with those top officials, but I also want to encourage people to have many relationships within agencies, because one of the things that has been most effective for us as a chapter and us as CTU is when we're crafting messages, we often have relationships with local wildlife managers or biologists or any of that. And even though they are not in a position where they can publicly say, I am opposed to this, this as in quotation, they can say, here are the concerns we have, or here are the concerns we hear, from the general public. And being able to take those concerns in crafting your message, the overuse is a perfect one. Okay, what does that mean? Well, in this region of the country or this region of the state, we're seeing litter problems. In this area, we're seeing trail erosion, whatever it may be. those are giving you those tidbits to reach out to make those connections. And it's often those other relationships you have that are building the content for you to move forward.
That's a great point. Staff relationships are invaluable because guess who staff becomes? The leadership. You know, when I was on staff with Ken Salazar, a young Dan Gibbs was on staff for Congressman Mark Udall. He's now head of Department of National Resources. So
Great.
goes to show you, get to know the guys on the ground because someday they become important. Dan, not me.
Okay. So do we have any questions? I see comments and some resources posted. Any more questions or comments?
Guys, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I was gonna type it in the box, but I started just getting frustrated.
Yeah, we have a
I've got
small
a-
group. Everyone can just chime in or wave their hand and we can unmute you,
Great, good deal.
everybody.
Thanks for doing this tonight, guys, first of all. I guess my question might be for Matt or Ross. But if I'm a chapter member or chapter leader, and I'm looking to connect with a local representative or legislator at a community event, how can I just like stay updated in my local town as to what's going on? Do you see what I'm saying there? Any suggestions for folks as far as just building those relationships from the ground up?
Very easy, I guess, from my standpoint, and I'll let Matt chime in after this, but everybody likes talking about their time on the river. Everybody likes talking about what annoys them. You got those two things, let them talk. You'll hear a whole lot of what the issues are, whether it's fishing related or habitat related or anything else.
It's good advice, right? Everyone likes to talk about themselves or everyone likes to bitch. So just let them go. And that's an old reporter's trick, actually, which is going to be my bit of advice. And great question, Matt. But, you know, your local reporters, these are invaluable resources. Craft a relationship with them. They may not see themselves as policymakers, but they are policy followers. And so you stay close with them, and they generally are pretty in tune with what's going around your local community. But Matt, it's a great question. How do you seek those opportunities out? You know, I think occasionally there's postings of activity in message boards and local newspapers, but I don't think that's where you're really going to get in touch with the undercurrent of what's going on. You have to meet the people who know sort of about what's going on. And these are these key leaders, community leaders and stakeholders. I reference them as people who may not be trout advocates or environmental advocates or conservation advocates, but they are local stakeholders and local leaders. So they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in their neighborhood. So, you know, it's our job to learn from them what's going on in our neighborhood and then to convert them into trout advocates and conservation advocates, right? But it's a great question, and it's tricky and it's different in every place, but there's certainly similarities all over that we can choose best practices from.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question or anything else from our panelists? Okay, well, I guess we will call that a wrap. I would thank you, all of the CTU members that joined us. We really appreciate you listening in, and feel free to follow up with any of us if you've got questions or want to get more involved. Thank you, Matt and Corinne and Ross, so much for being here and speaking tonight. I really appreciate it.
Barb, thanks for all your hard work pulling this together.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for hosting.
Bye-bye. Have a good night, everybody.